Hello, today is February 6th, 2013, and you're listening to I Think You Think, a podcast that puts a new spin on debate and discussion. I'm Justin, and on the other side of my computer screen is James.
Hey, folks.
And we are your hosts and carry no credentials worth noting. Tonight, we are joined by Lane.
Hi, everybody.
Lane and I met in college when we worked on several plays together. He blogs at theguiltyconscience.com. I will put a link to it in the underbar of the video, as well as it being on our Tumblr and on our Facebook. I Think You Think is a podcast that focuses on what we, your hosts, think, but also what you think. Too many times we spend debates and discussions talking past one another and not enough time trying to learn and understand why someone thinks what they think. This is what makes I Think You Think different, because we are focused on why people think the way that they do and why we think the way that we do. James and I believe that the forum of ideas should be open to everyone, and everyone should have the opportunity to challenge and be challenged by ideas. We are not here to pass judgment, but merely discuss ideas and topics. This podcast, first and foremost, is a conversation between us and hopefully you. Feel free to email us, follow us on Facebook for future podcasts, and follow us on Tumblr for links relevant to the podcast. The links for each of these can be found in the underbar of this video. I Think You Think is produced by Stolen Arts Productions and recorded live at Fisher International Studios. How are you two doing today?
Man, you've got that fast talk thing at the end there down. That was pretty cool.
I know, isn't it? It's been doing it for a little while. So, the snow has rolled in our part of the country. And Lane, you do live pretty close to where we live, so did you have to shovel out from under this?
I did. I took got an early train home from Chicago yesterday because I knew it would be coming down. And my normal 7-minute commute from the train station home was a 45-minute commute. And ended up having some shoveling too. So, but you know what? I'm feeling lucky compared to what it looks like Boston's going to get hit with here this coming up.
Pretty big, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't. What about you, James?
Yeah, I left work. I have like a 10-minute ride home. I left work at like 4:30 yesterday, and it took me about a half an hour to get home, which, you know, it is what it is. And then this morning, chisel out the cars and off to work again. But, you know, I mean, it is what it is. Been living here all my life, so every now and again, the snow drops, and you do what you got to do.
Yeah, I remember talking to one of my employees at work who was talking about the way, you know, the weather and is it bad out? And I said, no, it's Chicago weather like it should be.
Right.
You just drive a little slower and don't act like an idiot, and you'll get to where you're going fine. So let's dive right in. Lane, you get the distinct honor of being our very first guest on this show. So we have no idea how specifically we're going to kind of go with this. But you had some topics that you and I had talked about, and James had kind of talked about what we were going to do for the show. We hadn't talked to each other for a couple of years now. You've been, as people graduate from college, they move apart. They don't get to spend as much time together. Our lives have brought us back together. We've had an opportunity to sit down and talk about some of the things that have been going on in our lives, and I was really excited about getting you on the show to talk about some of the things you were interested in. So I'm going to kind of just turn things over to you at this point, and we'll see where it goes.
Awesome. Well, let me kind of set things up a little bit for folks who maybe don't know us as well, and kind of give a little context for the conversation. So back when Justin and I went to college, we both attended a Baptist college in the Chicagoland area here, and you know, I think, you know, knew each other kind of at an acquaintance level. Justin, I don't feel like we were probably super close then, but we got to spend a lot of time in theater, as you tend to do. You got some late nights, and you kind of, you know, you grow close through those week-long just getting ready for showtime sets, and so it had a good friendship and stuff, but ended up reconnecting and realized that, you know, we've gone in somewhat different directions on our religious outlooks on life, and I thought that was interesting to reconnect with Justin and hear his thoughts on that. So one of the things we thought we would do is discuss a little bit about, you know, how do we see the realm of ethics? You know, when we decide things are maybe right or wrong, well, why do we make those kinds of value judgments? And I think one of the great parts of our discussion when we got together a couple weeks ago, Justin, was on, how do we talk to our kids about those things too? And you had some interesting stories on that. So maybe we can start out there just by chatting a little bit on, what is our kind of baseline for, how do we make decisions about what's right or wrong in the world? I'll give a little bit of background on where I come from. So I'm an Anglican, and I base my beliefs on the Bible, church history, and the creeds that have been traditionally given by the church. And there's a long history of discussion in that area. So I come out of a pretty traditional, conservative background when it comes to this topic. And maybe it'd be useful if we kind of went around the circle and talked a little bit about where each of us come, from in our personal beliefs on this, if you guys are open to that.
Yeah, certainly. James, why don't you go ahead and go, and then I'll finish up, and we'll come back around to Lane.
Well, for me, I wasn't raised in a religious household. My mother was. She went to Catholic school, but it wasn't big in the house. But I think a lot of where my ethics came from was just, it still was handed down. Both my parents were very, their parents were very bright and raised them very well, and they just instilled that in us. You do unto others, and as you wished unto you, and you're good to the people that are around you. Ethics, and I was thinking about this earlier. Like for me, a lot of what I deem right and wrong comes from my sense of empathy, and that sense of empathy definitely comes directly from how I was raised. To just be able to put myself in other people's shoes and realize that people aren't really different because of color of skin or sex or sexual preference or whatever it is. There's really doesn't make people different at the heart of things. So, I mean, for me, that's kind of it. I mean, that's, it's that empathy and just, you treating people the way I'd prefer to be treated. And it's just kind of, as far back as I can remember, that's what I believed was the way you interacted with the world. How about you, Justin?
Mine's not unfamiliar to where Lane had come from. I've mentioned this, I think, a little bit in the past and some of the other shows, and then I believe I mentioned it in a future episode that we've already recorded.
How do you know that?
I don't know. One of my vacation episodes. But I was raised in a Christian home. Nazarene, in fact, was the church that I went to until I was around 12 or 13. I started going to an American Baptist church, and so a lot of the right and wrong was kind of instilled in me through my parents, through Sunday schools and things like that. I was always kind of a pensive child that would have at times fits of anger and rage. I do know that as I got older, nearer to the end of my high school years, James had talked about empathy. The concept of empathy existed for me as a concept, but it was something that I really started to understand in the later years of high school. I started understanding the concept of putting yourself into someone else's position and trying to understand, like, a lot of the things that I had done that were do these things as good or bad was kind of more spelled out to me through religious teachings and things like that. As I've gotten older, my concept of religion, faith, and belief system has obviously changed. And so where I get my ethics and my morality from now is a more like secular humanist approach kind of to the concepts of ethics and morality, but still based very heavily in the concept of empathy. So, yeah, I hope that answers.
I think that's interesting. So that's a great kicking off point, actually, because one of my first questions I'd love to throw out to you guys and your perspective on this. It's something I kick around with as I think about it from my perspective is if you take a look at kind of this idea of having an ethics based on empathy and understanding the other person as you would want to be understood. I mean, that's traditionally kind of the golden rule type of thing, and obviously it seems to stem from at least my understanding of history. You guys can feel free to correct me here, but the Sermon on the Mount is where Jesus Christ initially teaches, do unto others you would have them do unto you, and then there's a lot of the discussion around, hey, if someone does you wrong, actually, that you treat them better than that. That it's not just an eye for an eye ethic like you used to see back in maybe the Old Testament teachings that Moses handed down to the Israelites. But Jesus begins to call his followers to something more compassionate and kind of a higher good for humanity. And so I wonder, as we begin to talk about these things, in somewhat of a post-religious sense, Justin, I think in your sense, more of a secular humanist sense, kind of how do you hang on to some of that, without the idea of divinity or of religion. I'm curious to how that kind of holds together with pushing away some of the other parts.
Well, I mean, as James and I have said many, many times, neither of us are. We don't really have credentials in a lot of things, and I am not a history buff, or I don't teach history or anything. From my experience, and then a Wikipedia page I pulled up. The Golden Rule, and I was pretty sure on this, the Golden Rule does predate the texts of Christianity. Ancient Babylon had a Code of Hammurabi, which is like circa 1780 BC. So, I mean, it's not specifically kind of set to any kind of a Christian or biblical text. It does predate it. I think that a lot of societies kind of model themselves around that. Some of them, they work it into their religion, and then other ones, not always the case. Sometimes it's in their laws, and with like Babylon and some Chinese philosophies. Anyway, to get back to your actual question, I think that the biggest thing with, as I understand secular humanism, the biggest thing is it relies heavily on the concept of empathy and an ability to understand that certain actions have consequences. All actions have consequences. And by making decisions about some particular aspect of what you do or what you don't do will affect how other people, other sentient life, other human beings that are around you will feel or will become part of that decision. And so a lot of my ethics kind of stems from that. I guess is probably a very broad sort of definition for what I think what you were asking. Specifically, on a personal level, I do things for people because I personally, it makes me feel good to know that I helped somebody. And sometimes I do things for people because hopefully by doing something good for them, they'll do something good for me. Not in so much as say, hey, if I kick you this, are you going to kick this back to me? But more for example, I have a neighbor, speaks pretty much only Spanish, very little English. I had a tree fall down in my yard, and I was trying to cut it down. He came over and with a saw, him and I cut this tree apart, and this was two people who are separated by language, worked together to cut this tree apart. And he didn't expect anything for it, but a lot of times I will think about the fact that he had done that. He had no need to. And so, not on every occasion, but on many occasions, he's a little older gentleman. I will mow the area between our houses just while I'm out mowing, because I think about these things that he's done. And I've seen him come over with his leaf blower and blow leaves out of my yard during the fall. And And so it's this concept of reciprocity. I don't necessarily do it because it's quote unquote the right thing to do, because I know that he's willing to do things for me. I should be willing to do things for him.
James, do you have anything to add on that thought?
I mean, for me, I have to go back to just my upbringing. I mean, for someone who was brought up, in a religious household, you're taught these rules and these structures and the basis behind it, or the foundation of it, the learning of it, is based around and within that religion. For me, I learned a lot of the same things without that basis of context, and this was just what was taught, whether it was directly from my parents or from my grandparents or the other good role models that my family would have in my life, some of which came up in religious backgrounds and others that didn't. But just that structure, that group of people that raised me through my formative years sort of just instilled it in me in the same way it could be for someone who was religious. And it formed who I was and formed who I am. And, when I meet someone, the little things you'll do, let someone cut in front of you in line at the grocery store because they have less things. I don't look at them and decide if I'm going to do it because of who they are. It's just, oh, I have 12 things. You have one thing. Go. Or, a million other like little things that I could do that aren't really the line between good and evil, right and wrong. But it feels right to do it. I'm not sure why I do it. I couldn't tell you any specific moment when I learned that was right. But it's just something I do.
You also, if I remember correctly in previous conversations, James, you also believe in the concept of karma too, right?
I do. I don't believe it to be like, I think the way I described it. Now, spoiler alerts for, I think, future podcasts.
You're right. You're right. I think it is in a future podcast.
Okay. But yes, I do.
Justin, you're a psychic.
That's amazing.
Psychics.
So
that was the last podcast.
Oh, that's right. Now we're moving backwards.
Wait, wasn't psychics another? No, I don't know.
Oh no, wait, it was. Wait, I don't know. No, psychics
it's all
is
out of order. You need to get back from vacation so we can have a linear time frame again. But I do in the overall sense. I do feel like what you put out there, you will get back. Good, bad, those things are going to come back to you one way or the other. So yeah, I don't know why that thought didn't cross my mind in relation to this podcast and this subject matter. But I definitely do. I believe if you go out there and you put crap into the world, you're going to get crap back. And if you go out there and, put your best foot forward and bring positivity into the world, then that is going to come back at you. I mean, a lot of that, I think, has to do with the people that, it has helped me attract to be in my life. Just by being a positive person and being a giving and caring person and someone that can be trusted and counted on. That brings the right people into your life. And if you follow that other course, you're going to, the same thing's going to happen. People that are okay with that negativity are going to be a part of your life. And it's contagious and it builds and it snowballs. And, there's a totally different James out there in the world in some alternate line of the world that in my early 20s made an entire different set of decisions, became a different person, and, doesn't get to live the life I get to live today. Yeah. But that's probably a whole different podcast in itself, right there.
Yeah, I think that that you guys are both bringing up some really interesting pieces. And I think one of them is that that the way we inherit ethics. I think this is fascinating because if you sit down in an ethics class or if you read a book on ethics or you kind of really try to kind of isolate this and say that it's a practice or a discipline or something. You tend to forget that really the way that we do this is very ingrained in kind of just normal life, right? Like no one ever sat you down and said like, okay, here's the defining rule for like each and every situation, and this is how you deal with this, and this is how you deal with that. It's more organic than that, right? You said like you mentioned, it's stuff that you learn from your parents, through their positive and negative influences, and the stuff that we see as good is like, oh yeah, I want to take that, I want to make that part of my life and the way I treat people, and the things that maybe we were turned off by, we don't accept those. And so I think that's fascinating. It was actually, as you were chatting there, reminded me, David Foster Wallace was a writer and essayist, and I don't know where he fell on the religious spectrum. I think he was actually an atheist, and but he brings up this really interesting point about growing up in kind of the late 70s and 80s, and he said, our parents always told us, don't lie, right? It's not good to lie to people. And he said of his generation, well, that was kind of boring. I didn't care about not lying. There was nothing sexy about not lying. I didn't see any inherent value in not lying. And I could lie to people and get things that I wanted. And my life seemed to be going pretty good. He goes, until I ended up in my early 30s and was in Alcoholics Anonymous and realized that I was incredibly lonely and broken because I had no friends or no one I had developed intimate relationships with. And I realized, maybe I shouldn't have lied to everyone.
Yeah.
and I think about that story so much because I think it's really profound that we experience ethics, right? I mean, we talk about it like it's really kind of a highfalutin idea, but it is one of these things that, like you said, it's in the grocery line, it's in between you and your neighbor, it's something that happens at the dinner table.
It's definitely something that grows with you as much as you grow into. I would say that the way I view my ethics now than when I did 10 years ago or 15 years ago or last year, it's definitely it's something that's constantly in flux. What we say, what we think is right and wrong, is something that's constantly being defined.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't. I say this by also saying at the same time that, and I don't think any of us here are saying that the concept that I have of ethics is the best or the right one, and everyone should have it. I would say that there are some concepts of ethics that are better than other concepts of ethics, but when you get down to it, the ethics that the three of us have between us are different in their own ways, but I wouldn't say any one of them is better than another, and that's why Sam Harris has a good book about the moral landscape, and he talks about these different peaks and valleys of morality. And ethics and morality are very, very similar. They're kind of in the same sort of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about that you can have lots of different peaks, lots of different ways to approach a moral concept, and lots of different valleys. We can say that this situation is definitely an immoral situation, and this situation is definitely a moral one. But there can be more than one necessarily moral peak, and there can be more than one moral valley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that we could probably all sit down and say, well, what the Nazi Germans did to the Jews was unethical, right? That's not a very hard statement to make.
Right.
I think you have to be pretty cold to not go there. Similarly with, you think of Stalin and starving several million Ukrainians. Okay, not a good decision. And then there's things that seem obviously good. That's the person that will give an organ to a child so that they can live. If you got a spare kidney, that sort of thing. It's like, oh, that's very charitable. That's way beyond kind of the norm, and bravo to you, sir. But in reality, and this comes back to someone I was kind of the point I was making, I think, of that so much of our ethics actually sits in sort of more of the mundane territory of how far do I shovel on the sidewalk, and it is as maybe kind of trite as that sound, I really don't know that it is. I think that those bonds that we form with the people that are in our lives, that we're close to, and how we treat those that are around us, has a really significant impact in the broad spectrum of things. And if we choose to see those as meaningful interactions, we do develop, I think, better communities. We develop better as individuals, and part of that is because from my perspective, I think that we're created to interact with each other and treat each other with love. Now, I think we come to some of that at different points, but I think it does fulfill something of the human capacity to interact positively with those that are around us and form good, intimate connections.
Well, I think a good example of that is, say you're the one at the grocery store and you're in a hurry to get through, and you come up behind, someone who's got a cart full of stuff, and you got two things in your hand. You're looking to get home or get wherever you're going, and maybe they look like a grumpy person or whatever. You're like, oh, they're never going to let me through, and you don't even ask, but they're like, oh, go through, and they're really nice. It's going to put like a little spring in your step. Like, that person was awesome. I'm so glad, I was able to get through. I'm going to get where I need to go on time. And then, maybe you're out in the parking lot and something else happens where you can help somebody else. And, instantly you're going to do it because it's kind of contagious. You've gotten it now. Somebody's, brought that positive energy to you. And now you want like more of that. Like, I got it. Now I want to give it to somebody. And you're right. It doesn't matter where the source of that is from, like what ethical, like roots that person has that does it, it passes on. And I mean, if you think about that in a bigger picture, you have more people that are doing that. And then it can really explode out from there.
Yeah. Kind of the whole pay it forward idea, right? To go back to that popular film of, hey, if you can push these things forward and be nice to those that are around you, I do think that there's dividends there. And sometimes that happens in the near term with the folks that we know and they treat us kindly in the near term. Other times I think it's stuff that we do and we don't necessarily see the payoff or how it affects the person, but down the road that does have an impact on them. I share a story with you guys. I had a friend probably about 7 years ago. He started hanging out with a bunch of guys that weren't a good influence on him, ended up getting into drugs and hijacking cars and stuff, and went to jail. And when he got out, he was really bitter with a lot of us for whatever reason. I think he developed a lot of anger and stuff. And he was like, well, hey, none of you guys are my real friends. And I was sitting in the car with him. This was about 3 years ago now. Then and I said, dude, that's totally not the truth. You're not seeing the right perspective here. I mean, we have been here for you. We do love you, but you kind of got your head up your ass, to be honest. And he got out of the car and stomped away. Well, just recently, probably about a month ago, I saw him and he came up to me. He goes, dude, you know what I've been thinking about a lot lately? I was like, nah, I have no idea what you're thinking about. He goes, thinking about that night in the car when you told me that you loved me and I didn't believe you and I ran off and I was all mad. And he goes, but dude, that just stuck in my head and I kept thinking about it. And I was like, wow, I haven't thought about that conversation since we had it 2 years ago, and it kind of blew my mind, to be honest. But little things like that sometimes will stick with a person, and you don't know how they're going to impact them.
Yeah, and at least in your way specifically of seeing the world, even if you never get something so specific to come back to you 2 or 3 years later, you in your kind of worldview, if I know correctly, as I was a Christian for many years, you actually receive, to a certain extent, reward for doing the right thing and doing good things here in this life that you get to experience in the coming life.
Yeah.
So at the very least, I mean, even if you never know that something good from you letting that person cut in line or help push somebody's car out of the snow, as we're experiencing that right now. You know that at the very least you can have that kind of knowledge that you've done something, even if it never comes back around to you. You have that. So we have reached about our halfway point. I know it goes quick, especially in great conversations like this. But this is the end of part 1. So let me pull up what I'm supposed to read here. Okay, so we will be back for part 2 in just a couple of days. You guys will just have to hang on till then. All right, and then we're just going to dive right into part 2, so we can keep this going. It's about 38 minutes.
Yep.
Welcome back to part 2 of I Think You Think. Why do I have a dot there?
I think you think?
Welcome back.
Put a question mark on the teleprompter.
Let's try that again. Oh, it's for of episode. I see. What is this, episode 11? Yeah?
Is it?
I think so, because did we just do 10?
Or 9? I don't know. Yeah, I think you did do 10, because... No, I don't know, dude. I don't know what episode this is anymore. It's all blurry. Hold on. Wait, I got it right here. This is episode 10.
Okay, this is episode 10.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And we're at 39 minutes now. All right, here we go. Welcome back to part 2 of episode 10 of I Think You Think. You can find part 1, most likely, wherever you found this one. Or if you're having trouble, you can find them in a link. You can find a link to the whole playlist in the underbar. So, without further ado, there is no topic 2 again. There is only our continuing conversation with Lane, who blogs over at theguiltyconscience.com. And we are talking about ethics. So, where did we leave off? Don't all jump in at once.
I'm not sure where we left off exactly. We've been sort of talking about different aspects. So, I mean, maybe we can pick up on a different...
Sure. I know one of the things, Lane, you had said you kind of wanted to talk about, we haven't really hit on it too much, and I hate to cut James out, because James doesn't have any children, but he does have some cousins, right? Nephews, something?
Nieces, nephews, the whole shebang.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know how much kind of instilling of ethics and morality you do for them, but maybe you can put some information in for us. But Lane has children. He's got like a small army that he is starting to grow, right, Lane?
I do, yeah.
A lot, right? You have like 15 or 16 kids now.
I'm working to get to that level. I've got 3 daughters and 2 sons, and there's a set of twins in there. Actually, the youngest, our last child, what we thought was going to be number 4, ended up being twin boy and girl. So I've got 5 kids altogether, and a big part of my job, as I see it, is teaching them how to be good human beings in this world.
And I have 2 children, and James, you have countless nieces and nephews, right?
It sometimes seems countless between friends and family. And I think just to put my 2 cents in here, I think the main part for me that maybe might only in a minor way, but reflect that, is that I have, being a restaurant manager for the past 16 years, I have had many, many, many high school age kids that worked for me.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the moment where I've maybe applied, it's very different than raising a child that is your own for all those years. But when I've kind of, tried to help those, kids, get through and maybe hopefully be a better and more productive person in the future of their lives, it's a totally different thing. But there's a similarity, and it came to mind when you were talking about it. But anyways, you 2 have 7 kids combined. I have more nieces and nephews than that total. But if you add in your nieces and nephews, I think you guys could take me.
I actually have no nieces and nephews, so I don't know, Justin. Do you have a host? You have a bunch of siblings.
I come from a family. I have 7 other siblings and a half sibling.
Yeah.
And my brother has 4 children. My eldest sister has 4 or 5. So.
Oh wow.
And there's so many. I don't even keep track. one of these days, I'm just going to show up at my mom's house and be like, who are these people?
Right.
So, oh well. But so kind of moving in the direction of how we kind of instill those sort of ethics and morality into our children. I know from my personal experience, my son, he was born in 2004. No, he wasn't. He was born in 2005.
I was thinking, I was like, that sounds wrong.
So he was born in 2005. So him being raised, even back then, I was still a Christian at that point, and so he's been being raised through through the time while I was a Christian, and then even into the time while I'm an atheist. But even when I was a Christian, my concept was always that I didn't want to instill upon my child any kind of this is the religion that you will be taught. I've seen people do that. Some not very close friends, but people on Facebook. I have seen videos of their child at 2 or 3 years old, saying that they're Christian and that they love Jesus. And I've never been that kind of parent. My concept was always, if the discussion ever came up, it would be, well, this is what Daddy believes, or this is what Mommy believes, and then these are the other kind of beliefs and worldviews out there, and kind of approach it in that respect. I don't think I'm getting off ethics and going into religion now, but I don't think yeah. Tied together. I mean, they're pretty closely intertwined. I don't think that a child, even my son, who is almost 8, has really developed the mental facility to determine what kind of a deity or not, or a lack of a belief in a deity at that point. It would be akin to saying that my son is a Democrat, or saying that my son is a Green Bay Packers fan, or something like that. They really can't. Their knowledge base is pretty limited in terms of that kind of thing. It's something that something for much later in their life.
Well, the only thing I disagree with would be being a sports fan in that, because some kids remember. I mean, I remember watching the Yankees with my grandfather when I was like 5 years old, and I don't really follow baseball anymore, but there's something about seeing the Yankees on television that still draws me in a little bit.
Hey guys, Justin here. I just wanted to let you know that we had a little bit of a technical difficulty with some of the audio in the rest of this podcast, and so unfortunately this is going to be a single part podcast. There will not be a second part. Hopefully we will have Lane back in the near future for as a guest, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank you guys for listening. We enjoy hearing your feedback, and that you guys can read any and all of Lane's blogs over at theguiltyconscience.com. So don't forget to try that out. Check him out. He's got some great stuff that's worth reading and thinking about. Thank you guys very much for listening. Please like the video. Please like the post on Facebook. Please comment, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.